Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Tech Transform podcast. I'm Paulina Rios-Maya, Head of Industry Relations at EM360. And in addition to overseeing the production of our podcast, I'm passionate about security, intelligence, and the latest trends in technological innovation. Today, I'm speaking with Nikhil Nandagopal, co-founder and CPO of Appsmith, about AI and its impact on low-code platforms. Nikhil, thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, Paulina. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
I'm super excited about this conversation because I wrote an article about low-code platforms and it's revolutionizing application development. You know, it enables users to, with minimal coding skills like myself, to create a lot of robust applications very quickly. So obviously, with the AI hype, we have to question ourselves, what is the impact of AI or how it is catalyzing this evolution of low-code platforms, and how do you think is reshaping these development tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. We hear a lot about AI, and I think there are a couple of different impacts here. So the first thing that we see is the rise of coding copilot tools, applications that allow you to essentially generate code with a few natural language prompts, right? And, at the surface, they kind of seem like an existential threat to low-code platforms. But I truly believe that the real value in low-code is not how quick it is to get up and running. It's how easy it is to actually maintain and modify these applications, right? And that's where I kind of see that although coding copilots are really useful to create, quick prototypes, I think they're going to be even more useful inside low-code platforms because once coding copilots generate like thousands of lines of code, developers find it really difficult to review that code, test it, really put their names behind it and say that, hey, this is production ready and, I'm confident that it's going to work. And so I actually believe the next generation of coding copilots will actually, work really well with low code. And I think they will fully integrate with low code. And I think that that's one big shift that I kind of foresee happening.
Amazing. Well, I mean, obviously AI, and just a little comment there, AI is kind of transforming this way of how you operate internally. And I'm sure that this kind of new technology will automate a lot of routine tasks. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there are different types of routine tasks. There are some that are rule-based, and those I think are already kind of well automated today. But I think the more non-routine tasks, which require you to have a lot of decision making in the process, those are the ones that AI is kind of really going to help you automate. Like PR reviews is one great one that we actually see just inside the engineering organization, where we have like a lot of, task rabbits kind of coming in and doing your code reviews on top of your issues, as well as, writing down a summary of your change logs. Those are also routine tasks, but can't be automated because they're not rule-based and they actually require human decision-making.
Yeah. And I think, when I think about a low-code platform, I always think, in terms within the AI, how it's optimizing a lot of the workflows and providing a lot of insights on it. But obviously, we have to talk about with the adoption of AI, it's not without challenges, right? A lot of people are talking about hallucinations and where it is AI systems are generating this inaccurate data or misleading information. So what are your thoughts on, in terms of the strategic advantages of AI and how it can provide some, like you said, streamlining for internal operations? And how can we mitigate those kind of risks like hallucinations or other types of issues with the AI, specifically now that it's kind of starting to develop?
Yeah. So, one, I think that AI is really useful for some of these tasks inside organizations for like internal operations, such as when you need to refund an order. Now, somebody might have said that, hey, I ordered a television from you and, I'd like it returned because it's not working. Now, a customer support agent needs to understand, hey, when was the television delivered? Does it fall within our refund window? Is it a large appliance? It might be categorized as such, and so therefore the policy might be different. What was the price range? Depending on the price range, the policy might be different, right? And so that's an example of a routine task that, again, requires a lot of decision making, and AI can actually be very, very useful there. And we see similar cases inside like loan processing as well. Now, in order to get all of this right, it's really important to actually solve for the data modeling and orchestration. That's really the key to success, because especially in large organizations, your data is everywhere. It's sprawled across your internal systems, your internal databases, APIs. It's sprawled across your SaaS providers. You even have a lot of written documentation, right? And that kind of makes some of these routine decision making pretty difficult. And that is kind of the key to making AI smart as well, because AI is only as smart as the understanding of the semantic relationships between this data. And so that's where, you have to have a RAG system with all of the semantic modeling created and things like that. But, outside of just telling you some of the basic things that you should have RAG and graph databases and multi-agents, most of this is pretty common knowledge at this point in time. I think my key point of view here is to actually lean into the fact that AI is going to hallucinate, and it is going to actually give you bad responses. But that doesn't mean it's not useful. How are you going to evolve and kind of modify your organization to help extract the value out of AI in spite of all of this? And to kind of do that, I think one of the first key things is to start by getting buy-in from the people who AI is going to impact, right? If you see a lot of pushback from people inside your organization, it's going to be really difficult to kind of drive that adoption, because AI requires a whole new way of thinking about how to work with assistants. The second is to actually take steps to introduce a way to verify AI responses, and not just take steps to verify them, but also train people who are working with AI to now understand that, hey, before you actually take a task, please verify the AI response. So you don't want customer support agents, for example, going ahead and just believing AI out of the box, but you would like them to get a recommendation, or maybe when I'm underwriting a loan, I would like a recommendation about, whether I should underwrite or not underwrite, and also verify, how did you come to this conclusion? Let me go through your reasoning, just so I have a second pair of eyes on it and I'm able to make informed decision, right? So also ensuring that you're able to change the training and change, the way that you approach the work in the organization is extremely important. And the third, I would say, is to actually design the user experience to incorporate for failure scenarios. One of the examples is our own AI chatbot that we use at Appsmith that I actually built. And, at the heart of it, I always knew that this bot was going to give wrong answers at some points in time. So we just made a very small user experience tweak where every time the bot gives you an answer, it firstly lets you know that, hey, I am an AI chatbot, so sometimes I might get things wrong. If you find my answers not helpful, guess what? You can just request to speak to a human. And if at any point in time, the user is feeling frustrated, or they're saying like, hey, this is not working for me, or I want to talk to a human, that's okay. One of our agents then swoops in, takes over, and is able to resolve it for them. And that makes for a great, delightful user experience, because users are getting their end result done faster, which is they want their customer support tickets closed quickly, right? And I would say the last one is to also rethink the roles inside an organization and how to approach them. Like in our support organization, for example, our roles have actually evolved to becoming maintainers of the bot rather than just the people who actually reply to customers. So now we've actually built a lot of training tools internally to monitor the bot, look at where the bot's actually going wrong, and enable our agents to actually go modify that bot and improve it over time. So I think it's kind of like a multi-pronged approach to really thinking about not just the tech behind AI that's going to help you become successful, but thinking about it as a holistic product. Like things inside your organization need to change, your data modeling needs to change, your people inside the organization need to change, and only all of those things together are what's going to give you that success.
I completely agree with you. I think many of the conversations that I had with now AI experts are talking about, it is a tool that helps you be more efficient, but there's also this human aspect of it. And I loved how you said, we have to take into consideration that the AI bot is going to have issues, it's going to have hallucinations. So therefore, we have this agency or human agency of saying, hey, if you don't like that experience with the AI bot, we can give you another type of customer experience. And it's going to be even better because they have the choice to actually go to an actual human and say, hey, I'm having these issues. I'm frustrated with the AI bot. I don't know what to do. And it allows them to have that agency or to have that independence and say, you know what, I'm not feeling the AI bot. I just want to talk straight to a person. And it's that, possibility or flexibility of doing it. And I think it's super important also to talk about culture. because a lot of organizations are automating, they're bringing up emergent tech, but they don't think about how it fits their own culture. And I think that last point that you said about skills and skill building, capacity building is super important when it comes to if you're going to implement AI specifically to your organization or applications. It's important to understand how people are going to interact with it, specifically inside the organization. So obviously I'm here to pick your brain, Nikhil, because that's what I'm here for. I want to know some of the skills that you think developers must have to effectively build and customize these AI applications, because now, we are driving innovation with AI. It's across every industry, but developers not only need to have a strong foundation in programming, but also now understand machine learning, data science, specific needs of the industries that they serve. So what are some of the critical skills that they can, develop, specifically when we're talking about adapting to this growing demand of solutions in different industries?
That's a great point. And the way I think about it is that today, the way that we envision data is evolving. When we think about like data modeling, we think about relationship databases. We think about how do we manage the relationship between these various entities. But with LLMs, that's sort of no longer the case anymore. And so I think the first big shift in skills, and I wouldn't say this is entirely a new skill, but it is certainly an evolution of the way you think about data modeling and database design, is how do you think about modeling data in a world where you're not modeling for a system with deterministic rules, but you're modeling for one with probabilistic ones. And you're trying to think about the semantic relationships, not just within a single data source, but across various different data sources. And how do you ensure that the optimal data is fed into this new system so that it can actually give you correct answers? So I think the first big one is around like data modeling and how that's kind of evolving in the future, whether it's RAG, graph data sources, thinking about like ontologies and semantic relationships, functional calling. I think all of that itself is like one big skill. The second one is, there's going to be a much deeper understanding in the way that we think about data security and access controls. Today, there's a fairly simplistic view of data security when you think about it, because a lot of the access controls are built upon deterministic rules again, where you kind of know that, hey, I either do or don't have access to this data. But again, with LLMs, the lines kind of get blurred over there. And we need to think about how do we isolate data, especially sensitive data inside organizations from bad actors, right at the infrastructure level. So sometimes it's not just good enough to have rules at the application layer anymore. We're going to have to think about data isolation at the very infra level to ensure that there's absolutely no chance that an LLM will give the wrong response to the wrong person, right? So I think that's the next kind of big skill. The third one, I would say, is actually in terms of thinking about testing. When we think about testing and automation testing or manual testing, we're so used to deterministic inputs and deterministic outputs. You write a test case, it's about a certain set of parameters that runs against a particular criteria, and you generally expect it to hit a true or false at the end of that, right? But now you're kind of dealing with a system that is non-deterministic in nature, right? And you're thinking about how do you feed it a variety of inputs, but also what are you matching against? Because those outputs are not going to be deterministic. Those outputs are as well probabilistic. So we're going to have to rethink how does testing evolve in the future, and how are we going to develop systems to ensure that the AI applications that interact with these LLMs are actually getting to the net business outcome that we want, or are they actually getting worse over time? So that's the other big one. But outside these hard skills, I think it's like the last, honestly, most underrated of them all is sort of like the product mindset, which I actually see in some of the most successful AI engineers. AI as a technology itself is in a very nascent stage, and it's rapidly evolving. And I think the ones who are more successful with it are the ones who are relentlessly kind of exploring it, understanding its limitations, and designing workarounds around those limitations. Developers who kind of look at applications as specs to be built are very unlikely to succeed in this era and in this space. We need developers who are more product oriented, who are thinking about business outcomes, who are figuring out how to build bridges, when there are clear chasms between what you want to achieve. And I would say like that's the last like kind of big skill that we need to develop.
It's super important because I feel like there's a lot of vendors out there that are thinking, okay, how do we implement AI? However, they're not thinking about that business product, right? They're thinking, okay, we're going to integrate it. However, yeah, how do you integrate it for your customer as well? And that is another another conversation in its own, Nikhil. But I think as organizations continue to adapt or even adopt AI, I think one of the most exciting things or areas of development here is, the AI-driven inter-application integration, which, means they're enabling, like you said, a lot of software systems to communicate and collaborate in real time, which also entails a lot of threats. And you already kind of hinted at that, like data security. And another big term, I think, is like data trust. And we have to think about data trust in terms of like, okay, there's new efficiencies, there's new capabilities. How do we actually trust the data that's coming out of it? So I obviously have to talk to you about the future and the new possibilities because we're talking about innovation. What do you think are the new next generation of interconnected applications? I mean, this is a huge question for you, but in this hyper-connected ecosystem that we're having, specifically with AI, what are your thoughts on, the possibilities of the future in terms of the generation of intelligent applications?
Yeah, so Appsmith, we're in the business of building highly customized interfaces so that business users can take action inside organizations. And I think that's the first thing that's going to dramatically change. I think so today, because you need these highly customized interfaces to perform a variety of tasks like refunding orders, or processing loans, or managing inventory, what typically happens is that as you get to a critical mass of complexity, the applications and pages become so complex that it's really, really difficult to actually use them anymore. Like it requires a lot of training and a lot of understanding. And I think that with AI, that's kind of like the first big change where we're going to see a simplification of interfaces because we've seen that, chat has kind of become one of the most natural ways for humans to actually interact with software. We're kind of seeing that pretty much play out today. And I think that the world of applications will move from a variety of highly complex applications to these micro apps that are sort of triggered from a unified chat interface. So I still believe that there is going to be a need for customized interfaces, but they're going to be sort of micro in nature and they're going to be embedded inside the chat interface and they're going to be triggered from there so as to lower the learning curve and simplify the experience for end users. So I think that's going to be like the first big change and the big possibility that gets unlocked. The second one I see is that, today a lot of systems are incompatible with each other. And the only way that they can speak is if they actually have APIs with compatible data. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And that's kind of where AI is able to make this bridge between various systems. It's able to kind of take data from one system, extract it, transform it, and format it into, a format that another system can actually consume. One of the, common examples I actually see is if you're just thinking about like expense management and applying for reimbursement inside an organization, you might end up getting a lot of your bills inside your email, right? But your expense management tool can't read your emails and it can't understand those bills. But AI can actually go through your email. It can process those invoices, whether they're PDF or images. It can extract out of that. It can then go ahead and actually insert that inside your expense management tool, right? And so it can actually make two very disconnected systems start speaking to each other. And I think that's going to be the other change where we're going to see a lot of use cases and automation that was not possible before, simply because those systems never tried to solve for the long tail of use cases, and they didn't believe that those were important. But there is clearly like a need for them, and AI can actually bridge those gaps. The third kind of possibility and change that I foresee is today we have applications that adhere to a set of rules, and we have humans that monitor those outcomes and add more rules and optimize them over time, right? So applications are largely rule-based, and humans monitor their outcomes and they tweak them and they continue to modify the applications, write more code, and try to make them better. With AI, I think that applications will move from being instruction-based to kind of more goal-based, where they will actually monitor the state of the system, self-evaluate whether the goal is being achieved or not, and start taking more actions to kind of optimize the system to achieve the goal, right? And that leads to a very different type of application where rather than humans constantly trying to feed it, and you're limited by the potential of the human, their number of experiments, their thought process, their talent. You're going to see a lot more experimentation because AI can actually try a variety of things. It can try to optimize in various directions, and it can essentially try to get to like a net positive outcome over time, right? So I think that's the first thing, which is I believe that this is how the landscape of applications is kind of going to evolve. But to actually do all of this, like I think there are a lot of things that need to change, firstly at the infra level itself. The most traditional stack today looks like you have a database, you have a backend server with a couple of REST APIs, you have a front end, which is either built in React, you have a few UI components built on top of it, right? And this stack today is not sufficient enough to service this next generation of AI applications. To really build this next generation of AI applications, firstly, you need a vector database that's going to store all of the data that AI needs to be enriched with. And this vector database needs to sort of be able to take data from all of your other systems and be able to sync it inside of it. And to do that, you also need an AI orchestrator, which is basically sort of like a backend server that communicates between your LLMs and the vector database. What makes the AI orchestrator unique is that it needs to have, firstly, some of those access controls baked in that we talked about. It needs to have access controls at the row level, the most granular level, to ensure that only the right data is actually being fed to the LLM. Over traditional REST-based servers, the AI orchestrator actually needs to be streaming-based because LLMs take a long time to actually answer complex queries, and LLM responses are really large, so you want to probably stream them to your front end. And on top of that, the AI orchestrator also needs to maintain all the various semantic relationships between all of your data so that when it's presenting it to the AI LLM, it's able to get a much better response and it's able to make some of those function calls and fetch the right data at the right time. On the front end, I think that we're also going to see a consolidation of UI elements. Like today, we have large UI libraries. We're going to see a lot more focus on the chat widget. The chat widget is kind of going to become the central hero widget and hero piece of the application, where today we generally see it's like the table widget or a list widget or a chart widget that's typically taking up the space. I think the chat widget is kind of going to become the central piece. And this chat widget is going to also need to provide a variety of citations via document viewers, via being able to look at links, being able to inspect web pages. All of those are going to be required. It's also going to necessarily be responsive so that you can actually embed it inside your existing applications. You can pretty much take it on the go because a lot of people are also chatting on their mobile devices today, right? And I think the next piece is also going to be a workflow service so that you can actually manage the approvals for your AI. Because again, AI can take certain actions, but you don't want it to take the critical actions. You're okay with it taking a couple of actions that are not going to lead to a disastrous outcome. But when it comes to, let's say, actually refunding an order, when it comes to actually approving a role, you want it to actually behave as an agent, as an assistant, or as a recommender in that case, but you still want a human to be able to take an approval. So I think ensuring that you have a workflow layer with an approval system baked in is going to be super critical. And actually the last part, I think, of the tech stack that I envision, which I think is really understated and a lot of people don't think about, is the surrounding toolkits that allow you to actually monitor, log, and modify the AI context and instructions. You need toolkits to be able to get visibility into how these AI assistants and agents are actually behaving in production and be able to modify them, take action in case something's going wrong, and just ensure that you can retrospect and see if it's getting to a net positive or a net negative outcome.
Mm-hmm. And it's that kind of visibility that it's super important when it comes to, where your source is coming from, because there's vast amounts of data. And like you said, there's not enough humans to look at that kind of data and be like, okay, well, where is it coming from? It's super important to have that log where, it tells you where things are and how things are getting fed into the LLM. So obviously we've talked about chatbots, providing personalized customer service to content creation. The possibilities are endless with AI. But with the hype surrounding a lot of Gen AI stuff, I think there is a need to differentiate between the promises and the actual capabilities. Because I feel like a lot of people now, the AI hype is like, oh, wow, it's going to take over the jobs and, everyone's going to be robots next year. So what is actually real and what's hype in the adoption of Gen AI in your own terms, Nikhil?
Okay.
I think the biggest success for AI today is actually coming from customer support use cases. I think the adoption of support assistance is very real because it kind of acts as an augment to your existing support team. It's easier to adopt. You're not concerned about like risks of something kind of going wrong with responses over there. So I think that's certainly real. We're also seeing some adoption of customer support agents, but those more in small to medium-sized organization and not so much in enterprise. I think enterprises are still kind of struggling to get success with AI. And the truth is that the majority of AI products or other projects inside these organizations end up failing simply because they underestimate the quantum of changes required to get to success. Like we talked about, there needs to be a change in the way that your data is structured and modeled. There needs to be a change in the roles that you have in your organization and how they think about the job to be done. There needs to be a change in the way that they're trained and what kind of SOPs you follow to actually get this process done now. And so because a lot of organizations underestimate the quantum of change that's actually required to get to success, most AI products kind of fail inside these organizations. And especially AI products that people are buying off the shelf are kind of delivering low value because organizations are not investing the time and services required to actually fine tune it for specific business outcomes. Like you said, most people are thinking about, hey, how do I implement AI? But the objective is not to implement AI. The objective is to achieve that business outcome. And how can we leverage AI to actually achieve that business outcome? So I think that that's kind of where the overall landscape of AI is. Most enterprises are really struggling because small and mid-sized businesses are a lot more fault tolerant. It's kind of, it's not going to be a huge struggle there if something goes wrong. But as I've kind of spoke to a lot of enterprises, what I've learned is that, even in the case I was speaking to this really large hotel chain, and they were saying that, if somebody managed to trick the AI to commit to a room rate for some reason, right? Yeah. Like, they were saying that, we would be liable to that. And that would be a huge challenge to us. So, if the AI accidentally, gave out some incorrect information, that would be a huge blow to our brand and our business. So these large enterprises are not as fault tolerant as small to mid-sized businesses. And so they are struggling a lot more to kind of get to success with AI. But that's also because they need to invest a lot more in some of the key areas that we talked about and take not just a product angle, but also an overall solutions angle so that they can get like a net positive outcome. This is also why I kind of believe that today AI assistants are getting a lot more adoption than AI agents, simply because most businesses are not as fault resistant today. And they want to ensure that they at least have one human in the loop who can approve, review, audit some of the responses before they end up going out.
It's that maturity, right? When it comes to either you're too mature and there's a lot of risk coming into it, or there's not enough maturity for you to actually invest in the things that many companies could have, but they cannot because obviously the risks are higher. So thank you, Nikhil, so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I'm sure our audience took a lot from today's podcast.
Thank you so much, Paulina. It was wonderful speaking to you as well.
So thank you for everyone listening. For further information on what we've talked about, please head on over to appsmith.com, and we'll be back next week with another episode on our podcast series. Until then, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all major platforms and follow the conversation on X and LinkedIn. And for more great content, head on over to em360deck.com.